At the time of the formation of the United States and the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the country consisted of 13 official states and a population of just over 3 million citizens. Over the next century, the country would add 29 more states, and its population would explode to nearly 70 million people. In 10 short decades, the United States of America had transformed from a fledgling experiment in democracy backed by an agrarian economy to the fastest-growing, most technologically advanced society the world had ever seen. If one city exemplified the growth of the country during this period, it was Chicago. Built on a small river connected to the Great Lakes, Chicago's humble beginnings were that of a modest trading port on a marshy prairie. In fact, the name Chicago itself is the name of an onion plant that grew wild in this swampy land. However, this all changed in the year 1824. In that year, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers completed the Erie Canal, which connected the Hudson River in New York with Lake Erie. Chicago, located strategically along these shipping lanes, would soon become the largest inland port in the country. Everything about Chicago grew as a result. Its economy was transformed, and its population would grow from 10,000 to over 1 million at the end of the century. Moreover, Chicago would innovate, invent, and create an unprecedented scale, giving the world everything from the skyscraper to the Ferris wheel. Apart from its inventions, Chicago also devised new ways for its economy to run and for goods to be bought and sold. Perhaps no other person had as much influence in this regard than a former traveling salesman named Aaron Montgomery Ward. Montgomery Ward demonstrates leadership and legacy because he had a vision of how the country was growing and how to create a business that drove that growth. Beyond the westward borders of Chicago, the United States continued to push even further during the 19th century. People by the millions endured hardships unimaginable to pursue the manifest destiny that was the Western Territories. Many died in their pursuit, but eventually others settled down. Towns were created, and new societies began to flourish, complete with many of the goods and services found everywhere. However, the vast distances that separated the manufacturing centers and the newly formed towns in the West meant there were limitations on what could ultimately be offered. From this situation spread Ward's idea of a mail-order catalog company which revolutionized retailing forever. In August 1872, with 2 fellow employees and a total capital of $1,600, he formed Montgomery Ward and Company. Unlike local country merchants, Ward offered no bargaining and no credit. His free catalog, printed by the most modern methods, allowed the customer to see pictures of consumer goods and imagine how they might be used. His first catalog had 163 pictures listed. By 1883, the company's catalog, which was now simply known as the Wish Book, had grown into 240 pages with 10,000 items. In 1896, Ward's acquired its first serious competition in the mail-order business when Richard Warren Sears introduced the first general catalog. In 1900, Ward's had a total sales of $9 million compared to the $10 million for Sears, Roebuck and Company, and the two companies were to struggle for dominance for much of the 20th century. By 1904, the company had grown so much that it mailed 3 million catalogs weighing about 4 pounds each to customers. In the 20th century, the company opened a new building stretching along nearly 1/4 mile of the Chicago River north of downtown Chicago. The building would serve as the company headquarters until 1974, when the offices moved across the street to a new tower. Keeping watch of the operations of the company was a statue called the Spirit of Progress, and depicts the goddess Diana dressed in flowing robes, balancing on a globe and holding a torch in her right hand. The company entered the new century with very large ambitions. Aaron Montgomery Ward, the visionary salesman whose name remains synonymous with the mail-order catalog business, died on December 7, 1913, at the age of 69. He had spent 41 years of his life devoted to running his beloved company. In his absence, Robert Thorne became the only second president of the company. While he retired shortly after his appointment due to ill health, under his leadership began a number of dramatic changes to the company that became the face of the increasing competition from the rival Sears. 1926, the company broke with its mail-order-only tradition when it opened up its first retail outlet store in Plymouth, Indiana. It continued to operate its catalog business while pursuing an aggressive campaign to build retail outlets in the late 1920s. In 1928, 2 years after opening its first outlet, it had opened 244 stores. By 1929, it had more than doubled the number of outlets to 531. Its flagship retail store in Chicago was located on Michigan Avenue between Madison and Washington Streets. Despite the expansion, Montgomery Ward ran into several difficult times during the Depression years of the 1930s. By the end of that decade, the company had to implement layoffs and cutbacks just to avoid bankruptcy. On a brighter note, in 1939, as a part of a Christmas promotional campaign, a staff copywriter created and illustrated a poem of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. The store distributed 6 million copies of the storybook in 1946, and actor Gene Autry popularized the song nationally. As the century moved on, Montgomery Ward surely but slowly began to lose its ability to compete with a growing number of competitors, including famous retail stores like Macy's, JCPenney, and Target, all of whom began to take Ward's loyal customers. In 1985, the company closed its catalog business after 113 years and began an aggressive policy of renovating its remaining stores. This only worked another 15 years, and on December 28, 2000, the company, after a lower than expected sales during the Christmas season, announced it would cease operating. All stores closed within weeks of the announcement. In the story of the growth of Chicago and the growth of the country, Aaron Montgomery Ward maintains a special place for his innovative mail-order catalog business. Not only did he devise an entirely new way for customers to purchase goods they needed, but he helped fuel the expansion of the young country and the importance of his home city.